The Vogue team had worked with some of the most famous people in the world. They knew what celebrity looked like up close. They knew the difference between someone who performs warmth and someone who actually has it. They had seen both versions, many times, across decades of shoots, covers, and behind-the-scenes access that most people never get. And then Jimin walked into the room. And one of their directors said something that has now been shared by people who have never read a single issue of Vogue in their lives. Not because it was flattering, not because it was the kind of polished quote that gets written into press releases, because it was specific. And specific things, when they come from people who have no particular reason to say them, carry a weight that generic praise never can. This channel is for the army who already knows that the most revealing things said about Jimin rarely come from within the fandom. They come from the outside, from people who encounter him without context, without history, without 13 years of accumulated understanding of who he is and what it costs to become that. The last part of this video contains something that most coverage of this story completely missed. It reframes everything that came before it. The Vogue shoot had been in the works for months. Vogue Korea, a major editorial, the kind of feature that for most artists represents a significant milestone, the meeting point between fashion credibility and cultural reach that very few performers ever achieve. For Jimin, this was not his first time in this space. He had been Dior's global ambassador since 2023. He had attended Paris Fashion Week multiple times. He had been photographed by some of the most respected names in fashion photography. The world of high fashion had, by this point, absorbed the fact of Jimin, his presence, his aesthetic, his effect on a room. What they had not fully absorbed, what the Vogue shoot revealed in a way that previous encounters had not, was what he was like when the camera stopped. Behind-the-scenes footage from major editorial shoots rarely makes it out of the room in any meaningful form. What gets released is curated, the outtakes that the brand wants you to see, the moments that have been selected because they serve a purpose. But something happened during the Vogue shoot that the team chose to share, not in a press release, not through official channels, in a conversation. An interview given by the shoot's director that was so specific, so detailed, and so clearly not written for public consumption that when it circulated, people read it twice. Because the first time through, they thought they must have missed something. The second time through, they realized they hadn't. Here is what the director said. Not verbatim, because the specificity of the description was in the observation, not in any single phrase, but as closely as language allows. They said that what surprised them about Jimin was not the visual. They expected the visual. Anyone who had done their research, anyone who had looked at any photograph of him before walking into that room, had already formed an expectation about what the visual was going to be. What they did not expect was the space between shots. In most high-profile editorial shoots, the space between shots is managed. There are publicists, there are stylists, there are assistants moving in and out of frame. The subject of the shoot often exists in a kind of performance holding pattern, not fully on, not fully off, maintaining a version of themselves that is appropriate for the room without fully committing to the camera persona or the private one. Jimin, they said, did not do that. Between shots, he was completely present, not performing relaxation, actually relaxed, asking questions about the equipment, noticing things about the set that most subjects walked past without registering, talking to the crew the way you talk to people whose presence you actually register, not the way you talk to people who exist in the functional background of your professional day. The director said, "I have done shoots with people who are technically more famous, but I have never done a shoot where the person in front of the camera made the people behind it feel more seen." That sentence, that specific sentence, that is the one that traveled. ARMY, when the quote circulated, did what ARMY always does with observations like this. They went looking for the evidence they had been accumulating for years, because this was not new information, not really. The specific quality the Vogue director was describing, the way Jimin's attention makes the people around him feel visible, had been documented in 1,000 smaller ways across 13 years of content, interviews, and fan-captured moments. What was new was the source, a Vogue director, someone with no stake in Jimin's career, no particular investment in how he's perceived, no fandom lens through which to process the experience, someone who walked into a room to do a job and walked out with something they apparently needed to tell someone about. The thread that compiled similar observations from the Jonathan Anderson moment to Dior, from the Vogue shoot, from various non-K-pop sources who had encountered Jimin in professional contexts and said something unexpectedly specific afterward, got more more bookmarks in 48 hours than most BTS content gets in a month. There's a 2023 interview from the period when Jimin was promoting his solo album Face, where he was asked in a fairly standard press context what he hoped people felt when they were in a room with him. He paused for longer than the interviewer seemed to expect, and then he said something that has stayed in ARMY collective memory because it's both simple and genuinely difficult to live up to. I hope they feel like they matter. I hope they feel like I actually see them. That interview was from 2023. The Vogue director's observation was from this year. 3 years apart, different contexts, different industries, the same specific thing described from the outside in language that is almost identical in its core meaning to what Jimin said he was trying to do. That parallel, the alignment between the intention he articulated in 2023 and the experience the Vogue director described in 2026, is the detail that fans kept returning to. Not because it's romantic, not because it feeds any particular narrative, because it's a document of consistency, of someone who said what they were trying to be and then, apparently, actually became it.
The shoot itself produced images that circulated widely, as Vogue covers tend to do. The photographs were discussed in fashion spaces, in K-pop spaces, on aesthetic accounts that exist entirely outside of either world. But the conversation that outlasted the images was about something that isn't in any of the photographs. It's about the behind-the-scenes description of a person between shots. The specific quality of attention that a director noticed and chose to articulate in a way that went further than professional praise. There is a category of compliment that is so specific it stops being a compliment and becomes something closer to a portrait. What the Vogue director said about Jimin exists in that category, and that specificity is what made it travel past the communities that usually contain BTS content. Fashion accounts shared it, arts and culture accounts shared it, a few psychology-adjacent accounts shared it as an example of something they had been trying to find language for. One fairly well-known writer who covers creative industries posted a screenshot of the quote with a single line of commentary. "This is the rarest thing in a room full of people who are used to being watched." That post reached audiences who had never encountered Jimin before, and some of them went looking. A while after the Vogue director's quote circulated, a secondary detail emerged. Not from the director, from a crew member, someone who was present at the shoot in a technical capacity and who posted something brief on their personal account. Not a major platform, not a verified account, just someone processing a workday that had apparently left an impression. The post was short, 3 sentences. It said, essentially, that they had worked on hundreds of shoots, that most of the time, the subjects of those shoots didn't know their name by the end of the day, that Jimin had asked for theirs within the first 20 minutes, used it for the rest of the shoot, and thanked them specifically by name when they wrapped. 3 sentences, posted on a small account, shared by an army who happened to see it. By the next morning, it had been seen by millions of people. Here's the part that gets complicated, and also, paradoxically, the part that makes the whole thing make more sense. Jimin has talked about loneliness, not often, not in ways that feel like performances of vulnerability, but in specific, considered moments across the years, he has described what it's like to exist in a context where you are always the most visible person in the room and simultaneously the person whose actual interior life is least accessible to the people around you. In a 2024 interview around the Muse era, he said something that a lot of fans found difficult to hold alongside the public image. People think they know you because they've watched you, but watching isn't the same as knowing. I'm still figuring out how to let people actually know me. That quote has lived in ARMY's consciousness since 2024. And what the Vogue shoot revealed, in the director's observation, in the crew members' 3 sentences, in the accumulation of details from people who encountered Jimin in professional contexts and came away with something unexpectedly personal, is a specific answer to the question that quote raised. The way Jimin lets people know him is not through revelation, it's through attention. By making the people around him feel seen, by asking names, by noticing things, by being genuinely present in the space between shots, rather than managing the distance between himself and the room, he closes a gap that most people in his position keep carefully open. It costs something to do that, to be that available, to choose presence over protection every single time, in every single room, regardless of who is watching or whether anyone will remember. And the Vogue director noticed and told someone, and it traveled, in the way that specific true things travel, past the borders of the community that was already paying attention. There is one more thing. Something that circulated in the days after the initial quote that almost nobody connected back to the Vogue story because it came from a completely different context. During the Brussels concerts, July 1st and 2nd, 2026, Jimin stopped a live performance in front of 50,000 people because he noticed a single fan in the crowd who appeared to be in distress. Not a friend, not someone he knew, a person in a crowd of 50,000 who was having a difficult moment and who Jimin saw. He called for staff, he waited until help arrived, and made sure the situation was handled before continuing. The same week as the Vogue director's quote about how Jimin makes the people behind the camera feel seen. The same week as the crew members' 3 sentences about names. Different contexts, different scales, a controlled shoot environment, and a stadium of 50,000 people. The same quality, exactly. The specific, apparently inexhaustible capacity to notice the individual inside whatever crowd or context happens to contain them. Army put those things next to each other, the Vogue director, the crew member, the Brussels moment, and the thread that compiled all 3 became one of the most saved pieces of content from the entire week. Not because it made a dramatic claim, because it made a simple one. There is something that the Vogue director said that has been paraphrased in dozens of languages and dozens of contexts since it first circulated. But the original observation, the specific way it was articulated before it became a quote that traveled, was this: that Jimin is, in their experience, one of the very few people they have encountered in a professional context who seems genuinely more interested in the people around him than in how those people perceive him. That's not a common thing. In an industry that is fundamentally structured around the management of perception, it is genuinely rare. And in a person who exists at the level of visibility that Jimin occupies, where the management of perception is both a professional necessity and a daily condition, it is something that takes either an extraordinary amount of discipline or an extraordinary amount of character to maintain. The Vogue director, who has worked with extraordinary people for a very long time, apparently found it worth mentioning. And now, millions of people who have never picked up a Vogue magazine know that they did. The question this video is going to leave you with is not really about Jimin. It's about what we notice in people, and when we notice it, and why some observations travel and others disappear. The Vogue director could have said something complimentary in general, something that would have been picked up, shared once or twice, and forgotten. They said something specific instead, something that required them to have been paying attention, not to the image, but to the space between images. And it traveled because specificity always travels further than praise. So here's what's worth sitting with. How many people in your life make the people around them feel seen, not by saying the right things, but by actually paying attention? And when you encounter someone who does, what does it change about how you move through a room? The Vogue director noticed Jimin doing it and needed to tell someone. 50,000 people in Brussels experienced it from a stadium away. A crew member posted 3 sentences that reached millions. Some qualities don't stay contained to the person who has them. They travel.